to make sure that you are able to select your language down below with the icon interpretation. Click there and you can select English or French or Spanish, sorry. Solamente para estar seguro que todo el mundo puede escuchar la traducción en español abajo el icono.
Just to be sure that you all hear the translation, you can select the language under the icon called interpretation. We're going to begin in a few minutes. We are live on Facebook. We're going to record this meeting, and then we also have the YouTube streaming on the 2 channels.
Okay. Julie, may I ask you the favor to unmute your microphone from Orbis so we can see you, and Sister Florence will be able to co-host.
Yep, here I am.
Here you are. Welcome. Sorry, we were looking for Jilly, so we couldn't find you as Joe. So sorry.
It's actually Jill O'Brien.
Okay, so I copied on your email. I'm sorry. So welcome.
Thank you. Are you ready for me to start? Or?
No, just a second. In 1 minute, we'll start.
Okay.
Sister Pat will introduce and we'll start the meeting. So okay. Pat, if you like, you can start.
I want to begin by welcoming everybody, whether you're in your morning, your afternoon, or your evening time. You're most welcome to this event, which is a reflection together on Maria Simperman's book, Religious Life for Our World. And I think it's important that we begin by acknowledging the role of Orbis in
Pat, sorry, your video is off. Could you please switch it on?
It shouldn't be. I'm looking at myself. So, okay. We'll begin by welcoming Jill O'Brien from Orbis Publications, who will say a few words to us. But I was really struck on reflecting, this is the 50 years anniversary of Orbis, who have really played an extraordinarily important role in publishing books which really stimulate us, challenge us, and extend our horizons. And I was interested to read in the message from Pope Francis to the editor. He said, reading, Pope Francis said, can have a powerful role and become a compass that points the way, that guides us and allows us to cultivate a spirit capable of moving towards great goals that embrace the good that awaits us. And then he said, reading helps give flight to the spirit and helps us to reach the places where new narratives and new paradigms are being formed. So I think today in our conversation, we're part of these new narratives and looking at these new paradigms that are being formed. But before we begin, I'd like to welcome Jill and ask her to say a few words of introduction.
Thank you so much for that introduction. That was wonderful for you to mention Orbis's 50th. We're very happy about that. I'm proud of it. I'm also very happy to be here today to talk about Maria and her book, just briefly. Maria's been an Orbis author for many years, and just last year I worked with her on a different book that she co-edited with Roger Schroeder called Engaging Our Diversity, Interculturality and Consecrated Life Today. But the book you'll be discussing today, Religious Life for Our World, she's talking about, as you know, how consecrated communities can respond to the cries of today's world through their vows, charisms, ministries, and relationships. And she also encourages women religious and men religious to create what she calls communities of hope. And I think she's successful in that with this book. We are so proud to share Maria's book with the world, and she's amazing to work with. So I'm going to also post, I did actually already post information in the chat about how to order the book, whether you're in the US or otherwise. So look for that and enjoy the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Jill. I know that you have been an important accompanier of Maria in this task of publishing a book. So thank you for your work with her over this time. We're going to divide the session as follows. I'm first of all going to talk to two people who have read the book and engaged with Maria's book. Firstly, Sister Christine Mwale from Zambia. And then secondly, Sister Catherine Jones, who was born in New Zealand, but is currently living in France. So we'll have a conversation about the book before we ask Maria to share some reflections with us. So I'm going to turn first to Sister Christine. Sister Christine Owale is a Zambian sister she's a member of the Dominican Missionaries of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and she has served her congregation in both regional and general leadership. Christine is an educator. She has administered a girls' boarding school for many years, but she's a facilitator who's passionate about the formation of religious women. And she's currently ministering to sisters in Zambia, both locally and internationally. She's on the management team who run Kalundu International Center, which is a center of formation. And she's also part of the academic staff lecturing in transformative leadership. I know that Christine has been developing programs at the center for several years. And she also accompanies sisters who are Zambian sisters who are studying internationally, particularly those who are based in Nairobi. And she and I have had lots of back and forth over supporting sisters who are studying. So, Christine, I'm going to begin by asking you what this book itself has meant to you.
Thank you, Sister Pat, and greetings to everyone. It's a privilege and honor to be present for this beautiful sharing. We were privileged to have Maria lecturing to us about her book with 19 other sisters from 18 different congregations from Zambia online. So for me personally, when I joined to take part in the study and sharing and reflection of the book, I desired to have some new understanding, some deepened awareness of what my religious life is. I am celebrating my 41 years in religious life, and I felt there was something within me. I felt something new, something fresh that I could share with the young ones that are coming, that I could share with the sisters who come to Kalundu, that I could share with the leadership that I interact with. So for me, it was a book that has brought renewal. It's a book that has energized my passion for religious life. It's a book that has also helped me to realign certain things that I felt were not in line with who God wants me to be and what God is asking me to contribute and to share with people. So it's been a book that I would call a power bank for me in the many areas, especially with the new idea of intercultural. It's not a new idea, but a deepened understanding of intercultural communities as the hope for us really being authentic witnesses to the reign of God among us. And also that the vowed life, how it's so linked. And one of the things that I was amused about, I coined it, that there's a Trinity dance in Maria's book. You find she has all the time 3 things, she will mention 3 things about this and about that. So I said to myself, it really follows with the symbol that we have of like the pot, which is on 3 stones. She will talk about, sorry, I think sorry about that. So maybe just to start off, for me, it has been like a renewal thing, and a renewal book, not thing, a renewal that has come at the right time, and a renewal that has also deepened my own understanding of myself and the way I respond to community life, the way I respond to the vows. Sorry.
Thank you, Christine. And I know that you had the sisters on the program in Kalundu, that they also followed this text. And What impact did it make on their lives, and where did they find energy and vitality for themselves? What were the topics?
Like I said, we had 20 sisters who were participants of the program that Maria was running. And among the sisters, really the impact it had on them, if I had to start narrating, I would go on and on. But among the few things that the sisters talked about is just the freshness of what she presents, so simple and yet so deep. They were able to express the fact that it made them think of areas that maybe in the past they took for granted. For example, the way we look at intercultural communities, most of the times we talk about international communities and would think those that are only Zambians, you know, there's no need for having this spirit of intercultural communities of hope. So getting into the actual understanding, the actual application, and that this actually helps us to even fulfill and live out our vowed life even in a deeper way, was something that was very remarkable. And like one of them even said, you know, for her, she wishes the leadership would actually go through this because they have a key role to play in actually promoting the intercultural communities of hope by the way they'll be making the choices, by the way what they'll be emphasizing on as they lead the communities. Other sisters also talked about the vowed life, like when we looked at it and shared, and the different people that we shared with, they felt they had different perspectives or different angles at which they looked at, for example, the vow of chastity, the vow of obedience, the vow of poverty. So it really touched them at the core, and they kept emphasizing that they would want more sisters to experience this because it not only enriched them, but deepened their way of witnessing to the vowed life that they have.
So you feel that the way that Maria explained the vows really situated it in the context, helped the sisters situate it in the context in which they were living.
Very much so, because what Maria did, like if you read her book, she gives you different angles and different aspects. So it's up to me to pick it up and situate it in my context because it's really the core. It's like somebody gives you the ingredients and you decide how you're going to cook and what you're going to cook. Like, you know, like I said at the beginning, it helps you to boost your understanding, to realign some of the things that maybe have not been meaningful, maybe in myself and in others. And one of the things that the sisters commented about is in Maria's book, it's so kind of holistic. She always starts with myself. So whatever I'm going to do, like she talks about the listening, that I have to start listening. Then she goes to the communities have to listen. And then to the congregations have to listen. And the way we listen is, what are we listening to? What are we hearing? And then she brings in the aspect of discernment to say, we need to discern what we are hearing. We need to discern what is it telling us. And then the aspect that even as I'm listening, as I'm hearing, and as I desire to respond, I need to be aware where I'm located, the context. So if I'm listening, am I aware of the context where I am? What am I hearing? In my context, what does this mean? And when I discern, can I actually interpret what I'm listening to as something that is about building the reign of God? So she gave us the basic tools that you can use wherever you are, and also the age groups. The young ones, those that were younger in the group, they felt it was just as dynamic. Those that were in midlife, those ones that were also, you know, kind of in the afternoon, they all found something that really boosted and re-energized them and brought something new.
So you see the book itself as very helpful for community reflection, community sharing and discernment.
Definitely, sister. Yeah. I would see it, for me, I would even say each community needs to have this book. And I would say the leadership need to really promote that they themselves as leaders go through this book, but also promote it among the sisters. Because unless that, you know, chain happens, we'll find that we'll not really get the depth of the hope we need, the joy we need, and the witness that we desire to be, you know. So I would say it's a must, I think, for every congregation, especially the leaders. They need to have that, but even the sisters, if they can take even just one one paragraph of something and use it for prayer or for reflection, it would do a lot of good, like we discovered. And then you were asking me, we are at Kalundu International Center. So we've actually already started using the book for the course that we run. Like just this week, we have a sister who is doing intercultural communities of hope. And she's one of the participants that took did the course with Maria. Then we're having others that are going to come in to do the vowed life and all the different. So we're actually taking the book and breaking it down and creating an outline that we can share with the sisters so that when they're empowered, if we're able to get more books, we would want that they would have a copy of the book that as they go home, they have something that they can share.
Thank you very much, Christine, for those insights at a personal level and also in terms of dealing with formation at different levels from Kalundu. I'm now going to move on to Sister Catherine Jones. Catherine is from New Zealand and she's currently living in Lyon in France, and she served on the Africa-Europe Regional Council. She is serving on the Africa-Europe Regional Council of the congregation. So Catherine is an educator and has been deeply involved in adult faith formation. She studied in the South Pacific and at the Catholic University of America. And she did a year at Pisa here in Rome, where she studied Islamic studies. Having retired from her full-time ministry, she was missioned to Notre Dame de France, which is a Marist community at the service of French speakers in London. So I think there, Catherine describes how she saw the contrast between the bright lights of the West End of London and yet the many people living at the margins who are homeless or suffering from poverty or who are trapped by drugs. And she speaks herself about having a contemplative gaze, the words from Evangelii Gaudium. And she mentions too, where new paradigms and new narratives are being formed. So in her experience in London, in a refugee center, visiting detention centers, dealing with young people and with adults with learning disabilities. She was also involved in the House of St. Paquita, where the women who have been trafficked have been given support. So those experiences for you, I know, Catherine, were very transformative ones. So in your reading Maria's book, and I'm sure many of those experiences were brought to the fore, and I'd be interested to hear what your reading and reflection brought to mind.
Thank you very much, Pat, and thank all of you for being part of this ongoing international intercultural community, thanks to Zoom. I'd like to mention, first of all, I'd like to pay tribute, first of all, to Maria herself. The book is obviously born of her own lived experience. And an image that came to mind is that of the scholar, the householder, who knows how to bring out of their storehouse both new and old. Mm-hmm. And Maria, I think you have done that. And I stand in admiration of the way in which you so quickly adapted this course on the vowed life to the internet Zoom format because of COVID. And to have been able to create and sustain and encourage an international intercultural community of hope, I think, is an achievement worth celebrating. So thank you for being able to do that. And I felt immensely privileged to be part of that. Pat, you mentioned about living on the margins of society and of the church in many ways. And I heard recently Father Josh, a Salesian priest, who is one of the leaders with the rollout of the 7-year plan for Laudato Si, about the importance of listening to the periphery, to those on the margins, and not just in a passive way, but an inclusive way. And he said, when you hear these cries of the poor, including the cry of the earth and the cry of children, they have the signature of God. And I think that's a beautiful image, that when we listen deeply to these cries coming from the peripheries, we recognize they're the signature of God. And this is one of the things that I appreciate very much about Maria's book. There is the old, in the sense that you find a very, as Sister Christine pointed out, a very systematic, well-presented, well-researched study of the vowed life in its many different forms and context. But in her Trinitarian way, as Sister Christine said, Maria has the capacity to ask the questions. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? All the senses are alive, plus the sixth and seventh senses of listening deeper to these calls. And this is something that I have appreciated very much, both in the book and in the way that Maria taught around that. And she had a great knack of saying, now, after all that, I've got 5 points or 8 points or 11 points I'm going to develop. So I can't get to 11, but there are a couple I'd like to mention that were particularly helpful for me. Last year, I celebrated 50 years of religious profession as a missionary sister of the Society of Mary. So doing this course was like a review of my life as well as of my service in the congregation. And one of the things that I appreciated very much was Maria's emphasis on the charism of our congregations. And when we look at the vows, when we look at community, when we look at mission, there's the 3. We look at all of these calls, both in the past and in today, through the prism of our charism. And as a Marist, for example, I ask myself, and we ask ourselves as SMSMs, where can we hear the charism, the Marist charism, calling us on the margins today? Our earliest pioneer who set out for the missions of Oceania in 1845, Marie-Françoise Perrotin, heard the cry of women from the island of Wallis or Urbea in the Pacific, saying, come on over to us. If you love us, come and help us. And that is, I believe, the same call that we are trying to hear in our hearts, and that a text and a course, as Maria taught us, gives us the tools, has given us the tools to do that. That's my first point. Another aspect that I appreciated very much about Maria's course, the teaching and her own experience, was revisiting the vows. And after 50 years, you think you know the vows reasonably well. But always this question, how am I called to live the vow of consecrated chastity now, at my age? And as I look back on my life, and in my constitutions, you see little footnotes that mark certain stages of changes of understanding and experience of the vows. And I thank Maria for that, because the vows are dynamic. The vows are an expression of the generosity of God, and they invite us at each stage of our lives, particularly in moments of transition, to say, where am I called to live poverty? Where is my community called to live poverty today? How are we called to live chaste, consecrated chastity? And the one that strikes me the most, and I'm struggling with that still, thanks to Maria, is the title that she chose for the chapter on the vow of poverty, virtue and the vow of poverty, and it was entitled Poverty in a World of Plenty. Poverty in a World of Plenty. And when we had a tutorial with Maria towards the end with the asynchronous group, I said to Maria, the title bothers me. It challenges me deeply because many of us as religious, myself included, are living plenty in a world of poverty. Myself, and I think all of us, many of us have had lots of opportunities for education, for formation. We all live in pretty good houses. We have Wi-Fi that works. We can normally have 2 or 3 good meals a day. And we know if we're sick, we can be cared for. And how do we live? How do we live this plenty when we are surrounded by a world of poverty? And that's becoming, for me, that's becoming more and more evident as hopefully we're beginning to emerge from COVID-19. It's this gap, these chasms really that are emerging in society around us. Even here in Lyon, we see it with families facing enormous stress because of COVID, not just the illness, but the economic, social. We have a special ministry for elderly people. And we see there the price of mental health that they are paying. And also with younger people who wonder about their future. And one of the aspects of this living plenty in a world of poverty is how to put these gifts of plenitude at the service of those who struggle with poverty. Perhaps I've said enough at this stage. It's only 3 points, but I won't go up to 11, but I could. But thank you very much, Maria, and all of you for being part of this sharing.
Thank you, Catherine. And both of you have shown how the text itself is leading you to much deeper questions, both
Yes.
individually and communally.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose that's the call to these new narratives, call us to new paradigms, to new ways of living. Thank you, Catherine and Christine, for alerting us to that. And now I'm going to ask Maria herself to share some words with us. Most of you, many of you certainly know her. She's a religious of the Sacred Heart, and she lives in Chicago and ministers at Catholic Theological Union. And she's the associate professor of theological ethics, and she's the founding director for the Center of the Study of Consecrated Life. I always like that title because it's for the study of consecrated life. It's something that's ongoing. We've already heard of the various publications that she has either written herself or co-edited with Roger Schroeder. The text Engaging Our Diversity, Interculturality and Consecrated Life Today. And a previous book was on where God's people have HIV/AIDS. So this, her newest book really is a challenge to all of us, but I think it comes out of her own religious life. In fact, I'm sure of it. It comes out of her own religious life, which I always observe her living at different levels, in the sense she's deeply grounded in her own reality, but also has the capacity to look at the wider horizons of life, but also the wider horizons of religious life. Maria has worked with young women who are new members to religious congregations, with leadership teams, with congregational groups, both nationally and internationally. And I think her own theological and personal journey has also been leading her into the areas of reconciliation and peace building, and to see their connectedness both at a personal level, at an interpersonal level, and obviously at a global level. She enjoys life. in many ways. And I think that's part of who we are as religious. We bring our personal gifts, as Maria does, our love of hiking and reading and theatre and relaxing and enjoying beautiful things. So Maria, we look forward to you sharing some of the reasons why and how you wrote this book for us. Because in a sense, when authors write, they're thinking of a broader community. They're reflecting on their own, but on a larger context, and out of which the fruits of their own reflection gives us, if you like, a tool or an instrument to go on our own journey. So we'd like to hear your journey in relation to this book.
Wow. Well, Pat, thank you. And Christine, thank you. And Catherine, thank you. And all of you who are with us. That gives me great joy, because our religious life is shifting because the Spirit's moving, and the Spirit's always been moving. We're just, I think, maybe a little more aware because of the moment we're in. So I'm delighted to just be in this beginning of a conversation with you. And really, for me, it's always been writing with an unmet need in mind. So that was my original work on HIV/AIDS. It was at a moment where the church had things to offer, and there were ways, and what could we offer that was an unmet need? And then the work on social analysis was, how do we help people look at the issues in the world today through the lens of faith and skill? And so, those two, you're right, Pat, kind of led me to the next. Religious life was always somewhere in that horizon. And I was really fortunate when I was doing my doctoral work that I got invited to a gathering of women religious theologians. And these were the giants. I was a doctoral student, and you had someone like Sandor Schneider's there. And and it was a circle. And it was such a wonderful and different kind of experience of women religious theologians bringing to the fore their gifts of contemplation and reflection and the fruits of ministry to what was needed in religious life. So for me, throughout the years, religious life has been one of those areas to look at. And I have the blessing of being in social ethics and moral theology and spirituality. So those always say, how are you living it? And our religious life always gets asked, what does that look like? And so the book came because I had been for some years offering courses and engaging with groups. And people said, well, could you please put this on paper? And then more people could see it, could read it, could engage it. And for me, it's always been about a conversation, because if you're reading something and thinking about it, the Spirit's very much alive and will move the next set of questions. And so it was a way to do that. And honestly, I feel like there in the acknowledgements, I think I put the world in it because it was every conversation, it was every invitation on so many continents that not only included what I offered, but the back and forth sharing, the depth that goes with that just said, well, what would it look like to put it together? And I was actually in the Philippines and then in Korea a couple years ago, and it was there that the sisters in Korea were so kind. They translated what I was saying and said to me, if you write this, we will translate this. If you can put this on paper, we'll find a way. And what it did for me was to say that I wasn't only thinking through my own context, my own where I was living in the United States and, in my own position, but that it had a more global outreach. And so, I'm also blessed at CTU, we have students from 40 different countries. So they're always asking the questions. I don't have to look up what's going on in the Philippines. They will say, you know, we're in the midst of a typhoon, or this is what's happening in Indonesia, or this is what's going on in France or Colombia. So the gift of it was, you know, when you write, it's really pulling together a lot of different conversations. I also felt like people were asking questions like, well, you know, we've been living religious life. Is there anything new? And, you know, I would almost jump out of my seat and go, it's all in motion. And God is creating so much in this time. And we're being asked to pause a little and notice it and let that transform us in our congregations and call us forward. So it just, you know, my own prayer, because that's the only way we do what we do. If it's not rooted in that, it's just so clear. We get lost, or we can become an NGO, which is a great thing, but that isn't religious life. Like we bring my Trinity, who knew? We bring prayer, community, and ministry in everything we do. And our charisms flow through all of it. So at one point, I just found myself going, it's all of it. It's not only ministry. Of course, it's ministry, but it's also prayer and community. All of our constitutions have that. And so it was this framework that kind of came forth to me, and it's all God's call. It's God's mission and vision. And we hear it in ourselves, and we hear this in the midst of the cries of the people and the cries of the earth, right? And how do we land where we do? It's the charism that's in us that connects us to the charism in a congregation, in a place, and that just gets wider and wider into you know, the charism that's everywhere. And it was then going, and then we move to community, we move to the vows that get lived through that charism. And that's how one group might be doing the same as another, but we give it the gift of our charisms, and that every one of the vows gets lived in community, ministry, and prayer. So it was just trying to do that, and then trying to just say, how do we frame these? You know, so thank you, Catherine. Poverty in a world of plenty should be challenging, and community as a door and a destination keeps us from thinking community is just looking within. Community actually leads us outward, and we
can you say a little bit about that? Because I was intrigued by your two images of community as a door and a destination. So can you show the interplay between those two symbols?
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Community is a door. We walk through a door to get into our communities, whatever that door might be, whatever it might look like, and our different cultural contexts bring the richness of that. You know, would it be beads? Is it really a door? Is it you know, a cloth over it? But it's a place you enter. It's a place you grow. It's the place where my woundedness, my vulnerability, and my gifts get laid forth with my sisters. And it's also the place where we come to see God's movements in our lives. So there's so many areas in there. It's also, and there's more, but it's also a destination. We go forth and build community. We go forth and create. So to the extent that in my community, we have to have these difficult conversations and work through conflict, I keep saying to folks, you know what, people notice what we're working through in the gifts that we can give to that. To be able to say, yeah, we had to talk about what does it mean when we say Black Lives Matter, and go more deeply into that, because religious naturally bring it outward. And it's also the place where we can attend and walk with others and learn from others. We're building community all the time, all the time.
I like the fact that you say to us that we have to look both inward and outward. So if you take an event like Black Lives Matter, and then we look inward and we say, where would we find racism within myself personally, within ourselves as a group, in order to be able to go out and in a sense, a phrase you use here, tending to the wounds. The wounds are both within and they're without. So you're calling us, in a sense, to have the honest conversations that reveal who we are with our weakness and our brokenness, but at the same time that gives us a graced way to become healers.
You're absolutely right, Pat. I think of the example of in the United States, George Floyd's death. We are in the midst of people staying at home with COVID. So I think it was a moment where I sat and watched for 8 minutes, 46 seconds, someone die before me and be horrified and just silenced with the horror. And then to say, what is this asking of us, right? That it cries to God for this is not what we're called to. And then to say, well, what's the call to religious life in this? You know, it shifted my prayer, it shifted my reading, it made me listen deeply. And one of the things it did was just lead me to say, well, what is religious life doing in the midst of this? And to reach out to, Sister Anita Baird, DHM sister, and the Black Catholic sisters, and to say, I wonder, what's the conversation we need? And that's an example of community. What's the conversation do we need in our own communities, in my prayer, in our communities that are across congregations, in the community of religious life, but in the community of the church and the world and society. And from that, we started a series that would both awaken people and call us, like, how are we going to build a community that responds and attends to, but that means I have to notice my own racism, my own woundedness. I have to listen to stories that are difficult.
So in a way, anything that happens in our world, in any place, and we only have to look at our nightly news wherever we are, anything calls us. I think Sister Catherine said we have to see, hear, touch, tell, taste, smell, and listen at a much deeper level. And maybe COVID and our experience at this time has called us to a new place. So what do you see? And this is my last question to you, because I want to give others a chance to ask you questions. What do you see is the emerging narrative for religious life? Even little signs of that, because if you like, the words come first before we can put them together, I think, when we create a narrative or some image or symbol.
What a great question. So I'll probably write to you later today, my thoughts on this. But, one piece certainly is it's global sisterhood and brotherhood. Like we have to live it locally, but I am connected to Sister Christine and the people of Zambia in a whole nother way. And when she says people are dying of COVID right now, that goes into my prayer. So the global in a whole different way. And it doesn't matter if you're a local congregation or an international one. So I think linking with one another, which is what religious life, at least women's religious life, the men can speak to this. We naturally do that, but it's inviting us even more so. I also think, I said, poor Catherine is right. I would have people read, but I would always think about, well, what am I going to do in class? Because I can't simply have my class read what am I going to say to offer? And I thought there's always the new coming forth. So I'd say, oh, now I have 7 more points to offer in there. But I think one of the pieces for me was that I talked about interior conversion, which is needed, communal transformation. And then in the book, I had external revitalization. And now I kind of even add to it and say, and a letting go so the new can emerge, but also a recreation. I think there's a lot that we can't yet even see about God's movements of religious life and the shifting of it. So I think part of this is I think we're awakening, as Pope Francis is asking us to wake up the world. I think religious life is again awakening to pieces that those who were around for Vatican II knew to go deeper into the charism, knew it was this time to look at it. I think we're at this moment again in the time of Pope Francis that's asking us, let's look at this life again and kind of, I don't know, shake it around a little bit and say, so what's poverty asking today? What's obedience asking today? What's community calling for? I think the emerging is saying, we've done it this way, like names what is, but not necessarily what's calling. And I think that's going to be it. And I think we're going to do better by having these conversations, not only within our congregations, but across congregations, because we hear differently one another. That's my first 2 points. I'll think of the others later.
Thank you, Maria. I'm going to turn it over in a moment to Patrizia Morgante and also to Margaret to handle the questions. Being global, I have to go to another call in a moment, also on religious life. So there's a great interest in our way of living. I just want to point out an answer to one or two of the questions, or to alert you. The book is not yet translated into Spanish or French. The book, Maria's book, Religious Life for Our World, Creating Communities of Hope, is in English only. However, I always know when there's a demand for a text, it does get translated. I think also Catholic Theological Union would alert us to the fact that Maria teaches on the social teaching of Pope Francis at CTU, and that's an online course in the end of April, from April 19th to May 20th. And I think there are other offerings at Catholic Theological Union which people may be interested in. So as I end my particular section, I thank Christine for your insights and your reflections from your own perspective, and also those of the students who enjoyed the program, and also Catherine, your own reflections for us. Both of you, in a sense, are together with Maria. In a way, when we have conversations, we begin to create communities of hope. Because in taking anything written, any text that really calls us to an inner reflection in the context of our outer reality. And if we share that with one another, together as women religious and as male religious, as men religious, and as men and women together, we can begin to create this emerging future of religious life. And we thank you, Maria, for this wonderful text, really, that gives us much to reflect on. And we invite you, if you have questions to put to Maria, anything practical, or any reflection from what you've heard, any of our three speakers, anything that strikes you. I think Patrizia will tell you how she wants to manage it, probably through the chat, because with over 370 participants, it's very hard to see raised hands. So my gratitude to you, Maria, and to Catherine and Christine. Thank you very much indeed.
Pat, 1 second. I just want to say to you, thank you for your leadership and the way you have created global communities, the way you are gathering not only with religious, but with all kinds of folks that are interested in the gospel call outward and inward. And so I just think you have taken on a very prophetic role. People don't call themselves prophets, so I can call you one. But to both notice what it is not and what's calling us forth. I have to give you my undenied admiration, and I thank you.
We never do it alone.
No,
we do it with so many others. And,
thank you.
Yeah, we all know who stands with us and behind us. So thank you for those words, and I thank them too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister Pat, and have a nice meeting.
Yes, thank you.
So, Maria, there are a lot of comments in the chat actually, and they are thrilled to participate to your course in the CTU if but Colleen is answering people. So there are various questions. I think that Margaret can just give you a couple because in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we want to close. So I think there is a one in Spanish that I want to read immediately, and then I will leave the floor to Margaret so she can ask some questions from the English audience. And we are also people who are following YouTube and Facebook. So we are really throughout the world.
Great.
So the question in Spanish is, ¿cuál es tu mensaje a los nuevos?
What is your message for the new members?
Bienvenidos, welcome, and vamos. Sorry, I'm translating both. And let's go. Religious life is in a wonderful moment right now because it has to change and be transformed. Everything internally and externally is saying there's more calling. 10 years ago, people may have resisted, some might have resisted. Now we're realizing this. So and this is something for everyone, but with new members, I just invite you to go deeply into the heart of God, because that is the only way we will walk through the massive changes in society, church, and religious life right now. So be so deeply grounded, and God longs for that. So ask for that, and God desires that in abundance, to know our belovedness and this. So that's going to be key in life right now. The other is bring your newness to forth with questions. What are you seeing? What do you sense is calling for? How is community being asked to be lived today? What do how is obedience getting lived? What does discernment look like? And, somebody was asking about quantum leadership. It's about pulling us all together in a circle. Like people have different roles, but how do we together look? Newer members will be coming from being in places that some of us are not, some of us are. So you bring a different lens, you bring different sounds that you hear that I don't notice, and that's absolutely needed. So I want to say that. I also want to say, connect all around you, connect with your communities, connect across communities, connect globally. Because part of, God's desire, the reign of God, it is that people flourish and the earth flourishes as well. And the more we're linked, the less anyone goes through the cracks, and the more the earth can breathe. So it's this moment, and to be creative. I think the moral imagination, creativity is these are all Christian virtues. They're not bound by Christianity, but it's very much in our tradition. So I would just invite you to, steep in God, like build community in a lot of ways. Bring what you see here forth, and be creative, and don't be limited by any generation, your own or others. Like, this is a moment. Interculturality is about crossing all of this. That's all.
I think you should be shorter for the for the other questions. Otherwise, we can organize another meeting.
That'd be fun.
Well, I think the next question follows logically from that. So how do you suggest that we form new members for this? How do we form new members so that they can create communities of hope for the world?
Wow, thank you, Margaret. Actually, by all of us being willing to be created anew. Because even the language of forming, people are coming to religious life today as adults. There's part of their lives that have been very complete, filled, formed. So how do we invite the tradition of religious life into their lives and offer the best of that, and also invite their gifts? I think we're going to be, I think because of a lot of reasons, it's going to be far more conversational. I think newer members, my experience has been, and in going anywhere actually, we're going to have to offer what we offer our newest members to our whole congregation, right? So it doesn't help if the newest members are hearing all these wonderful things about community and how to deal with conflict, how to discern ministries, how to prayer, if we're not also offering that more fully to the whole congregation, because we're all in need of that. And it also then gives leaders people in elected leadership the opportunity to open those spaces up. And this is actually, in the wonderful document, New Wine, New Wineskins, I'm doing some writing on, you have the Vatican Office on Consecrated Life saying, please, ongoing formation, ongoing learning and deepening. Like it's that time. So whether you're 80 years old or 20 years old, all of that, there's always a newness coming forth, and to engage across generations is going to be a gift and a need. That was shorter.
So thank you. We have a time for another question from the English audience. Go ahead, Margaret.
Okay. Maria, what essential questions would you ask congregations who still have 200 or more members, whose average age is over 80 years old? And what kind of listening does this require? Even as they're welcoming new members, what kind of listening does this require?
I think as long as you're alive, you have a call. So Sanderson Edwards years ago, when I was much, much younger, had this wonderful line: religious life is a life, all that I am, with nothing held back, from the moment of my profession until my last breath. So until my last breath is all of it. And so it's living the call. I think right now it's saying, what does that look like where you are? And what is your call? Margaret used the word listen. To whom are you being invited to listen? How do we create spaces for the conversations that need to happen across the world? Like just COVID, never mind upheaval in Myanmar and as well as the United States. We're in need of sharing narratives on a deeper level. We're in need of rebuilding community. We're in need of saying, so where are we really being called today, now? And can I let go of what others are doing that's not the same need? And so I would say that whatever age you are, because it would be asking, what's our call in this? Because there is a call. And then how do you free? Freedom and intimacy with God are very linked. How do we create spaces to freely discern the Spirit? And that means how do those of you who've lived this life, and done your work as best you could, as best we all can, how have you listened to the Spirit and what's calling now? And how might we do that together? And what would that look like if we did that and brought our brothers and sisters together for listening? What if we did that across a lot of groups? And you know, charism we don't own. It's the spirits, creativity. So how do we connect with others within our charism across life forms and across charisms? So I think we look at, you know, the 80s don't get a pass anymore because we have Pope Francis, you know, who's saying, well, I have a sciatica problem and I'm still doing what I can. And so I think it's just asking us not to be superhuman, but to say, what does this moment of vulnerability in our world invite us to? And what does this moment of possibility and creativity offer? And how do we, what needs to be opened and offered for this to happen? And I think religious life is primarily spaced for this. And it's going to be part of our own renewal and recreation.
So thank you very much, Sister Maria. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Christine. I think that the final word should be a common word from the three of you. So as a speaker, usually people ask questions to you. So now I would like you to leave the audience with a question so they can keep reflecting, they can share it with their community, because I think questions are the best way to grow up, to develop and to change and to transform. So I leave you 1 second so you can think, and we can start with Sister Christine. A question to the participants, almost 4,400 participants.
I start?
Sure. If you are ready, you can start.
Oh, no. One more second. So my question would be, what are we listening to? How are we listening? And from which context are we responding? Because those two are linked. Are we able to listen and discern? So what are we listening to? How are we listening? And what is it calling us to respond to?
Thank you very much, Sister Christine. So let's leave the time for people in case to write before giving the floor to Catherine. While she unmute her microphone, she can ask her question.
Thank you, Christine. You took the question out of my mouth. I'd like to continue. Who on the peripheries are calling us to respond through our charism today, to see, to hear, to touch, to smell, to feel? Who on the peripheries are calling us through our charisms to respond in a new way?
Thank you very much, Sister Catherine. Very profound questions from all of you. Now the floor is yours, Maria. You can ask question or send a message, what you prefer.
Questions are profound, and I'm simply going to add to that. And if you heard Christine and you heard Catherine, my invitation to you is, what's one step, one small group of people that you are willing to gather with and have these conversations? where will you take one step towards having this depth of conversation? So it's an invitation. Think for a moment. Who do you want to email, write, call, and say, I think religious life is calling us, and I'd like to have that conversation. And then the group will know where to go. But the questions, what are you sensing, hearing? I'm hearing our course and all of this, but it's deeper than that. What are you sensing, hearing? And to whom are you listening? And what do you sense God's inviting? So maybe two things. With whom will you gather? And what do you sense God's inviting? Not think, not just here at that point. What do you sense God is inviting? The Spirit is inviting. So gather with somebody before the end of Lent. Gather with somebody. Invite people. And during the Easter season, what are we sensing? I guarantee something will emerge because the Spirit's there and eager among us. Thank you. Just by being here, you've opened yourself and you've brought yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for other profound questions. So thank you very much to all of you. Thanks to the interpreter, to Sister Florence, to Margaret, who help in that. And please read the nice comments that people are writing in the chat for you. So thank you very much. Thank to all the participants. So now I will open your microphone. So if you want just to say hello, you are most welcome to say. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Sister Christine, Catherine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patricia and Margaret and the RSCJ for in Orbis for bringing this together with UISG. Thank you.
Hello, it was a very good collaboration.
Thank you.
Greetings from India.
Oh,
hello,
Gracias. Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you from ground control.
Thank you so much.
Thank you from Albany.
Thank you, Maria.
Good night.
Where's my key? Thank you, Maria.
Where's the little chat? Is that chat?
Nice.